Dance your way to the top. The wild card. Okay. I think you all looked very talented, and I would invite you to find a mat and lie your talent down. But just Glenn is going to do that ATM observation assessment thing by himself. Because he loves it so much. So we'll continue the observation exercise tomorrow, unless we might have time to do another round today, maybe not. Actually, there was you know why I launched straight into that observation thing? Because I was watching you do the ATM that Ruth taught. I think you will agree with me very beautifully. I could see your 5 lines so clearly watching the group. There was this kind of uniformity across the group. And I was really interested if we did an observation thing after that, when the 5 lines are really clear in yourself, whether that would help you see, whether you could see the 5 lines in other people. Little theory of mine. We can explore that tomorrow if we don't have time today. So settling on your mat. Notice the way you're lying on the floor. You can run through a little bit of an inventory, if you like, about your various bits. So what bits immediately spring to mind? Legs. What about your legs? Is it the length that interests you? Is it the shape of them? Is it the density of them? Is it the position of them? Turned outness, as it were, the turned inness. And notice for yourself, what quality in the leg do you use that gives you your indication of the state of tone in your legs? So it could be any of those things. It could be how heavy they are on the floor, how light they are, how high the gaps are. It could be more an internal sense of, liveliness, which, as a word that just doesn't resonate with some people at all, or maybe it does resonate a little bit. So is this internal sense, this kind of activity sort of meter, maybe? Is it more about the shape, so that maybe they feel rounder or maybe they feel flatter? All these different descriptors that we use in a scan. And when you're starting to construct your ATMs, I would encourage you to stick to one set of descriptors. So if you're really thinking of length of limbs and length of spine, you stay with length, because if you start messing around with length and then density and then heaviness and then this and then that, people get quite lost. Now, we do it all the time in here because we're interested in what you choose. But again, I'll say it, you're not normal. We do things differently in here. And if you haven't done it already, maybe that's an exercise we can either do in here or might be good to do in your learning groups. I can suggest to Julie, is that you have little discussions in small groups about the kinds of scans that you can use. that would be congruent, that would invite people to notice something about themselves. Provide them with this sort of yardstick, if you like. And it requires you to understand something of what's possible that could emerge out of the ATM that you're teaching. So it can set the tonus, if you like. And slowly roll over and stand on your elbows and knees. So we're taking the wrist out of the picture at this point. So Larry, who I mentioned a few times, one of my dear friends, one of our dear friends, says when we say, you know, come up onto all fours, he makes the point that actually mostly it's all sixes. Can you feel the 6 points? If you're on your hands and knees, he says quite rightly there are 2 more points. So it's the toes of your feet. So it's actually all sixes. Feel that? Now some of you actually, it's quite clearly all sixes because your toes are tucked in underneath as if you're going to push off. So just distinguish between that your feet can be long, so that's that plantar flexion position where the tops of your feet, so they're called the dorsum, the tops of the feet are actually the back of the feet, right? It's where the hair is. It's another, let's remember dorsum. Dorsum means back. Backs are hairy. So the back of your feet is hairy. That's dorsiflexion. Whereas the soles of your feet, that's the anatomical equivalent of the belly of the foot. And we don't have so much hair on our belly. So you shouldn't have hair on the soles of your feet. And if you do, check the length of your incisor teeth because it might be that you've been bitten by a werewolf or something, I don't know. We've got hair on your palms of your hand. Check your incisor teeth as well. So, you've explored, so if your toes are tucked up, then your feet are relatively dorsiflexed, right? So the top of the foot is closer to the shin. Feel that a few times, right? Just be clear that that's a difference. It will make a difference in your hip joints. You probably have done several lessons clarifying this. So this lesson for the moment, have your feet long, which means that they are relatively plantar flexed, so that you're taking the weight, most of you taking the weight on your big toenail. If your heels are rolled out, you'll be more on the little toe. But if your heels are pointing more up, like neither in nor out, then you'll be more on the big toe. Let's play around with that a little bit. Again, it might be familiar or not. And now could you find a way to make a little basket of your hands and rest your head, the top of your head in a basket of your hands? And feel the difference between resting the top of your head in this little basket and then the forehead, and go a few times between the forehead and the top of the head. And could you sense the way it changes, firstly, the shape of your neck? So from where does your neck start? At the base of your skull. And then start tracking the vertebrae of your neck as you move gently between having the top of your head in the basket and the forehead. What happens to your, so just stay with the vertebrae. I was going to add in the chin, but that's a bit three-dimensional. Stay with how it changes the curve in the neck, the way the neck meets the head, and then allow your attention to keep moving down into the thoracic spine, so into the vertebrae of the chest. Could you track how it changes, or does it change? Maybe it doesn't. Does it influence the curve that might be in the vertebrae of the chest? Does it influence the line of the vertebrae in the lumbar spine, so in the small of the back? Does it travel as far as your hip joints? So does your pelvis move relative to your hip joints as you change your head from taking weight on the crown to taking weight on the forehead? And now just while you're still in this position, a few times leave your head so that the forehead, you say forehead or forehead in Melbourne? Both? I grew up saying forehead. What do Sydney people say? Right. So leave the forehead in your hands, and could you please lift up your left elbow a few times? And notice how you do that, where you do that. How do you generate lightness? Do you shift your weight, or do you hold your breath and lift it up and let it fall down quickly? And if you do shift your weight, where? On that base. So the base is your forearms, it's the forehead in your hands, it's the two knees, and it's the dorsum of the feet, so the top of the feet. Can you track the weight shift as you lift the left elbow? Good, and leave it and rest in sitting. So this is a note to budding ATM teachers. This lesson is mostly in this position. So you don't want to give people the opportunity to lie down a lot in between, because they'll get really bored with the big transition movement from lying to having their head on their hands. So I'll be watching you to see when people are looking a bit flaky, and inviting you to have a full rest on your back. You don't want to have that invitation readily available after every iteration. Is that sort of clear? Now, how do I make that decision? I'm watching you and seeing just how flaky and stroppy you're looking in the face, how droopy, how slow your movements are, those kinds of things. So I'm kind of getting the tonus of the room. Now, the tonus of the room at the moment is quite low. So I'm taking that into account, right, in this sensing. Now, of course, overriding all of that from a default point of view is when you need a full rest, you take one, right? This isn't so demanding on your wrist, fortunately, as the exercise this morning, because you're leaning on your forearms. This is it can be a demanding lesson, right? So you do what you find interesting and pace. So please come back onto your forearms and knees. Have your forehead in the basket of your hands. And this time, pay a little bit of attention to whether your knees are really under your hip joints, so that your femurs are quite vertical out of the floor, as it were, or have you found some kind of cheaty mechanism where you lock your pelvis into more hip flexion, so your knees are actually in front, like closer to your head? The reason why I'm being pedantic about this will become apparent later, but okay, now lift up your left elbow once or twice again. Good. And see how that is, and the weight shift is happening or not happening. And now decouple your left hand from your head so that your head can still rest in the right hand, but now the left hand is free to kind of roam around the floor a little bit. So you could flip your hand and have the palm down and explore very close to your head first. So just maybe slide the hand a little bit above your head, slide it around your head. At some point it might want to flip onto its back or whatever. But find a way that your left arm could become light enough that it's now no longer needed for stability, but it could be used for exploration. Like you could find you've lost a hairpin on the floor, and for some reason you have to do the woe's me with the head in the hand on the right hand, and you can only find the hairpin with your left hand. Could the back, and if there's a point where the back of your hand comes to the floor, could that be as sensitive to finding the hairpin on the floor? So the basic view is that your hand stays on the floor and finds around, that's it. And have you found your way under your chest? Or have you been exploring out to the side of you and above you? So what about the territory underneath you? What about the territory between your knees on the floor? What about the territory between your right elbow and the right knee? And is there a time there when it would make sense for the hand to flip? Seeing as you can do all these beautiful mudras and belly dancey things with your hands and stuff. Could you find a pathway that took you to the outside of your right knee? And find out there, where is it that your hand would like to flip? It would just be easier if your hand flipped onto its back. And how much of you is involved in that? So actually, interestingly, you are all pretty much keeping your trunks very, very still. Do you feel any weight, would you like to shift your weight onto your right elbow? Would you like your weight to shift from one knee to the other? Maybe not, maybe yes. Have a rest. So once again, the hidden Feldenkrais instruction of not moving your trunk was muttered in your ear, and I never said it. Isn't that interesting? So maybe some of you behind the pillars were moving your trunk. I couldn't see. It was not an instruction, but you all followed it, even though I didn't say it. It's the Western instruction. Don't move your pelvis. It's the why white men can't dance instruction. Sorry, white men in the room. Simon's just laughing. His pelvis is moving now. Okay, you're noticing bits of you that might have been a bit tweaky. Maybe. Come back into that position. I will give you a full rest after this one, if that's the carrot that will help the stick be tolerated a little more. So you're on the forearms, and the left leg, the left hand becomes free to slide around the floor a little bit. And this time, slide your left hand in the direction of the right knee, in the direction of the outside of the right knee. Could your head get a little bit lighter so that it could actually, as if your hand found the hairpin on the outside of your right knee and your head wanted to kind of follow there? So how could you help your head become lighter on the hand? Beg your pardon? It doesn't have to stay on the hand. No. Where could the head go? Could it lift? If the hand really wanted to go even further to that right side, how could the head help? So the right hand, your two warring hands, they're fighting over the hairpin. It's not there. It's not real. I just made it up. You're staying on the right hand, and the left hand continues to slide. You're staying on the right elbow. Yeah. The elbow doesn't lift, but the head could lift. The right elbow stays on the floor. No, the right elbow stays on the floor. It doesn't move. The right elbow doesn't move. The right elbow stays on the floor. It doesn't move. You got it? How straight could your left elbow go? Left elbow, left elbow. That's it. And can the eyes keep following the hand? Is there a line, can you make a little convenient gap? So that the head, yeah, the right elbow stays on the floor. The left hand and the head aren't pinned together. The head can lift. The head can move. That's it. Because the head and the right elbow are not the same thing. Maybe in some people's self-image, they might be. That's fine. Rest on your back. Rest on your back. Take a moment to sense any influence of this very weird movement on the way that you lie on the floor. So I will share a deep and personal piece of information about myself. When I go into this orientation, I kind of lose myself. I lose where I am in space because my head's upside down and my vestibular system go, what the hell? I don't know where I am. And it's not just my head that I lose, I actually lose the tracking of my spine. So it's a great work in progress for me. So you're coming back to the floor and you're using the floor to say, here I am, here's my head, here's my neck. I can feel its shape relative to the floor. I can feel the way my spine continues down between my shoulder blades, into my lower back, to my sacrum and my coccyx. And of course, you've got the line that you established with Ruth. You can return to that. So if you get lost in this orientation, how do you find yourself again? And I'm saying it's serious, it's an important life skill. How do you find yourself when you lose bits of you? How do you systematically find yourself? I work with a lot of people who have really profound sensory loss, where they've actually physically can't feel themselves just using, kind of the normal sensory modalities. And so we have a lot of fun actually finding ways that they know where they are, other ways, alternate ways of knowing where they are, and therefore who they are in a funny kind of way. Roll over and come back up onto your knees and elbows and forehead. Now, and did you learn something from lying down about bits of yourself that you might have been overusing that you would now like to make a conscious decision to not put so much stress on? Pay attention to those areas. If not, that's fine. Something may have just had a little whinge in your ear and said, could you perhaps not put quite so much pressure on me, or perhaps go so far, or could you get other parts to take a little bit of that work? Yeah? And now find a way to lift the right knee a few times. Make a really bad fist of it. You can lift it in the worst way possible. And then you've only got, the only other way is better, isn't it? So the instruction is deliberately vague. You can lift the whole leg or you can just lift the knee. Try both. And unlike that, lifting the left elbow, can you get away with not shifting your weight? I don't think so. Right? Because there's just too much mass to lift. How do you shift your weight? How do you know that you've shifted your weight? Where does it go to? What do you do that gives you this illusion that your leg is light enough to lift up? Can you still breathe? And then leave that and lift up your left knee. Is it the same? No, it's left knee. Can't be the same. What does it feel like? What did you learn from lifting up the right leg? About weight shift, so the weight shifting to the other knee. Does the weight shift on the elbows? Does the weight go more towards the elbows? So maybe you were just thinking about weight shift in terms of left and right, but what about weight shift headward versus tailward? You're bracing in your neck. Can your neck still be somewhat free to adjust? Could you lift your left elbow and your right knee? Could you? Oh, I committed a sin. Oh, that's a new rule. Oh, you better run that past management first. I'm not sure. I already owe the group cake. Sweets for sins. What church were you brought up in? Catholic. Oh, you just have to confess in Catholics, don't you? Just find a priest and say, I'm sorry, and they go, forgiven, and that's it. It's fantastic. Absolve you with sweets. I thought that was my Catholic friends, I wanted to be Catholic when I was a kid. I thought it was a great deal. Just go and sit in a little box and say, I'm sorry, and you go, fine. You got to pray. That's all right. Guilt. So there's guilt with no, if you don't get forgiven, you get guilty too. Guilt's everywhere. Catholics do not own guilt. Don't give me that. My Catholic friends say that they do. There's nothing like Catholic guilt. The Western tradition. You're lifting your right knee and your left elbow. If you really want to feel guilty for your lack of application. Levity. So you don't have to lift high. Could be a cigarette paper high. Lifting is still lifting. Good, leave it. And rest on your back, actually, because that was pretty gymnastic. So you're starting to feel why there was a reason that we softened up our spines this morning? We've all got nice soft spines, haven't we? I just committed the other sin. Did you pick me up? I did that on purpose. They didn't pick me up. You're just tired of it all, aren't you? Just, yeah. Take your index finger of your right hand and put it just under your skull. This time I mean just. It's only just under, where the skull becomes neck. And now make a little tiny movement of pushing your chin further away from your chest and towards your chest. And the index finger is that little kind of notch underneath your skull, and allow your index finger to inform you of what's happening as you push your chin out away from your chest and then close your chin down towards your throat. Gently, gently. And is your head free to move like this? Could you find a way for your arm to be soft enough that it could feel gently? And keep going with that forward and backward movement of the chin. And slowly change over so that it's not your index finger, it's the middle finger. On the same hand, if that's possible. The chin comes forward, chin drops back, and the head's nodding a tiny, tiny bit. And if you added in this idea that you're going to lick an ice cream, so that your tongue was going to lick this ice cream, would it be with your chin forward? And then would your tongue go back? So could it be as easy as licking an ice cream? And as you keep licking the ice cream, so your head is nodding a tiny bit, enough to lick the ice cream, change over the finger so it's now the ring finger that's feeling behind the neck. And then keep licking the ice cream and have the little finger feeling that junction between the back of the skull and the top of the neck. Leave it and rest with both arms long. And I learned something when I was, well, I learned a lot of things all the time. When one of the slides that the wrist ladies had, the ulnar side is also called the auricular. It's a auricular disc, because in Feldenkrais's transcript here in Amherst, he doesn't call it the baby finger or the little finger or the fifth finger. He calls it the auricular finger. So there you go. Now I know where he got it from. It's the original, I don't know what, it's A-U-R-I-C-U-L-A-R, auricular, not as in oracle, as in Delphi, the oracle of. Oh, ear. Oral. So I wonder what the little finger of the ulnar side's got to do with the ear, Jenny. Yeah. All right. There's a bit of Google activity for you. You stick your little finger, it's on the ear. Radiates around like an ear. Does your ear, is it, you stick your little finger in your ear and go oodle doodle doo or something? Only the little finger that fits. I used to work with ENT surgeons, and one of them used to tell the patients you shouldn't put anything smaller than your elbow in your ear, because they go mental with the stuff that we put in our ears to clean them out, and do a lot of damage. So if you put your little finger in your ear, I suspect that's not a good thing. These stories and more. Roll over onto your knees and your elbows. And with this idea of the movement that you felt with all 4 fingers of the nodding of the head, begin to slowly release your left hand and slide it towards the outside of your right knee. And your head can get softer. And how can you find a way that your head could follow that hand? So I'm not saying it's the exact same movement, but you've got a lot of freedom in that part of your head, right? So could you use the freedom of the head to take your eyes with the hand? With your hand underneath in that vicinity somewhere, take the load off one knee. So let's say your right knee, start with. And your left knee. Sorry, no, I'm not laughing at anybody in particular, just you, Simon. Yeah. Yeah. So you're just straightening the knee. Yeah, your foot can stay on the ground if you really feel like your balance is compromised. So you can leave the foot on the ground, just lift the knee off so the knee goes relatively straight. And trying to find a way that your head is not really deeply committed to taking your weight, so that your head is always free to move. Rest when you need to. And now pay more attention to your right knee becoming a little bit lighter on the floor, and seeing if that helps you take your head a little bit further through that gap. What happens to your right hand? I'd suggest that you have your right hand palm down now. Maybe that's a little detail that might help. And your head is free to go through the gap and follow your left hand. And some of you are finding a way that almost the back of your left shoulder is coming to the floor. What the hell? The back of your left shoulder coming to the floor? Could you find a way and find your balance somewhere? If the right knee needs to stay on the floor for balance, at least have it lighter. And that the back of the left shoulder, maybe even just the back of the left arm could find a way to have a little rest. Imagine that you were just a bit tired. You just wanted to rest. Oh, she's so sneaky. Okay, leave it. Rest on your back. Now, the point of this is you don't have to roll over, right? If you roll over, you roll over. The point of it is this is a really weird orientation. It's one of the points. There's always many, many points. And I gave you a little heads up, excuse the pun, about do you know where you are when your head is in a really weird orientation? So there's not many walks of life where you do have your head tucked under your right armpit with your elbow on the floor. And your left hand looking for a hairpin on the right side of your knee. It's not often. I would venture to have a guess and say that it's not often that you found yourself in that situation. So if you felt a little lost and like, where am I? I think that's a good thing, right? I think that would be expected. And it is an unusual configuration. So if you don't feel compelled to do it, I know I've got an enormous amount of internal authority and you'll feel compelled to do everything that I say. Like, I understand that. But if you could put that aside and listen to what is comfortable in yourself and where your curiosity is willing to go, please do. Roll up and stand on your knees and elbows to start with. And we'll loosen off some of the constraints. So you had earlier on the constraint about the right elbow staying pinned to the floor. Now that we've got this, you can have your right palm down, because your head no longer needs the basket, right? So the left back of the hand can slide down towards the right, and the right hand is down. And if that right elbow needs to get a little bit lighter, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to, though. I'm not saying that's a clue. It doesn't have to stay there. And is it possible to find a way that your chin could tuck in, that the head is free enough so that the right hand is palm down and the chin could tuck in, the left hand is on the back side of the hand, the left hand sliding, exploring, just seeing how far would be interesting. And then is there a point where the right leg could get lighter? An experiment, would you like the right knee to be lighter or the right foot to be lighter? Don't take my word for it. Could be both, could be one or the other. Play with it here. So if you play, then you won't hurt yourself so much. Yeah, that was a bit of a slipsy, whoopsie. Slipsy, whoopsie. So likely to. And where does the weight shift? So there's a weight shift sideways, but how about a weight shift headwards? And where would the weight go? So you've got your right hand. What about a convenient, could the back of your left shoulder be a convenient base of support? Yeah, you can fall over. It's great fun. Good. So your left hand is more to the right side of you. That's it. And so the back of the left shoulder could be a very convenient resting point. And now Simon knows why he's got a nice soft round back from this morning. And the chin is free to tuck in because the neck is soft. The neck is soft. Could there be something very interesting on the ceiling? So the neck, the head tucks so far under that you could look up to the ceiling. Would that help you orient yourself? As if then you think, how the hell did the ceiling get there? And if the left arm is still free to slide forward a little bit, that helps the chest to soften. And then in this position, could you still get a sense of the curving of the spine, as in the rocking chair? Maybe not. Stunned mullet look. It's confusing, isn't it, to be in this weird different orientation? Could you enjoy the confusion of not knowing quite where you are? Could you be confused and not hold your breath? And finding this sort of tipping point. And then finding out where, okay, the tipping point is where I'm no longer reversible. But it could be fun. It could be fine to have a little fall. If you need to, you don't have to. You're not compelled to. Yeah. I'll tell you at the end of the lesson what the subtitle for this lesson is called. You could probably guess. Rest on your back. That's what it's called, rest on your back. The famous martial arts move called rest on your back. Knee in face. Smelling armpit after a heavy day at work. Does my bum look big in this? I'm going to look behind myself, from underneath myself. I want to see myself in a new angle lesson. Pardon? Sense your spine. So did you lose your spine like I do when I'm upside down? Have you found it again? Where does it go? You know, is it like this sort of a home for lost spines, you know? Isn't it, you know, I was chatting before with Amanda about, you know, this, what our self-image is so labile, meaning it changes so quickly. You can be perfectly clear about who you are and where your bits are in one orientation and flip into another, and bits of you just disappear. How does that happen? It's so interesting. Am I just talking about my own personal experience and nobody has that experience? Please roll up onto your hands and elbows again. Have your head resting, the forehead resting in your hands for a moment, and that's at the original position. Feel that, how that is now. We'll just recap a little bit to see what influence this has had. Lifting one knee and then the other. Feeling the weight shift as you lift one knee. You can leave the foot on the floor if you like, or do both. The requirement really is for the knee to lift. Lift one elbow and then the other elbow so both knees can stay on the floor. Lifting one elbow, lifting the other elbow. So the head is still in the hands, but somehow not committed that the elbow could be light. And sense again the weight shift and how that might happen through all of you. And then allow the head to rock a little bit. So before you picked up the head and put the crown of the head into the hands and then the forehead. Now rock your head a little bit forward and backward so that you rock up towards the crown of the head and down towards the forehead. And what influence does this have on the shape of your spine as you just gently rock? So you're shifting the weight. Can you track that movement all the way through you as you come up onto the top of your head? Gently, gently. What changes in the shape of your neck? Could you imagine that you had one of your fingers on that part just below your skull, and that you could feel the changing shape of the neck in your mind's eye, as it were, and then how that influences the shape of the rest of your neck and the part of your spine between your shoulder blades. And now you can track also the movement of your chin relative to your chest. So I started to say that earlier in the lesson, right? And then I decided, no, it's too much. I just wanted you to track the shape of your spine. Okay, and then next time you find that you're taking weight more on the crown of your head, stay there and free your left hand to start sliding underneath you in the direction of outside of your right knee. Take your time getting there. So there's a point where it wants to flip. And could the weight of your head get so light on your hands, it was like your eyes and your head wanted to just follow the hand underneath your chest. What shape would your chest have to make to allow for that huge head of yours to go through there? So here's a little clue. If your chest sinks, your head is too big to get under that gap. So what could you do with your chest to help the head find its way as if it really wants to go with that left hand? Would it help if your chin stayed in close contact with your chest up to a point? Now, I didn't want to say that because then you'll glue your chin to your chest and you'll hurt yourself. But have a think about that. And then have a little taste. And maybe the right elbow doesn't have to be so glued to the floor. Maybe the right knee doesn't have to be so glued to the floor. Maybe the left hand can continue down a little bit more towards the right foot. Does that help the head to tuck through a little bit more and feel free to fall over? Because that's great fun, right? Could your right knee be free to move a little bit to the right and the left? Would that help you find a balance point somewhere on the back of your shoulder and this bizarre position on your head where your head might be slightly resting on the floor? So would the right leg be free to just explore a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left? Would that help the tipping point be less tippy? There you go. Beautiful. Right, leave it, rest. Find a way to come onto your back from there. All most of you need is just someone to grab your left hand and you could imagine you'd go straight into a judo roll. So this lesson is called Preparation for a Judo Roll. It's a little taste of things to come, not in this week. That's the denouement, as it were. Have a full rest on the floor and check in with a real purpose. I need you to check in for yourself to see what you need to do now, because we can, if you're feeling really kind of scrunched up and lost, we can do the same lesson on the other side. You don't have to make a decision straight away, but feel for yourself. What do I need? I as in you. Slowly come up to standing and feel, what do I need in the real world? and walk a little bit. See if that helps with the symmetry or the asymmetry. If I notice you're all walking around in circles, then I know what to do. If one leg's dragging on the ground or one set of knuckles is dragging on the ground, that might tell me as well. Cup of tea. That's the unoffered. There's a choice that you could have, or you could have a cup of tea. You feel like you're going in a circle. Would you like a water in, water out, and then we'll come back?